At the end of every year, I like to look back on the best, most formative memories I've made that year and reflect upon them. This year wasn't a great one for me, with the way my grandmother lost her mind to Alzheimer's, how that impacted my mental health and work ethic leading into the summer, the sheer overwork I experienced trying to keep up with my strict YouTube release schedule, work, and grad school, and the general stresses of living day to day. But there's one thing, one shining light that has made 2024 bearable, and that's my friends. Playing through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Rainbow Six Siege with my friend Ryan, and playing through Metal Gear Solid and Mega Man X's 1 through 3 with John and Jeremy have been the highlights of this year, one otherwise full of stress, anxiety, and sadness. My community has burgeoned into one that is crazy fun to interact with as well, and I enjoy every time you all have joined my streams or commented on my videos. To cap off my first full year of sustained, scheduled videos, my friend John and I played through Mega Man X4 completely guideless, with Jeremy in the background, laughing along and handling the back end of video recording and production. You're watching Rayl Deal Games, and I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you for clicking on it, my friend. And with that, let's dive right into my first thoughts on the game. Right away, my 90s nostalgia bone tingled in resonance with the low-quality voice acting on display in X4. Good voice acting in video games followed Metal Gear Solid, but that game didn't come out until the year after this one, making the voice work in this game more in line with the Resident Evil games coming out around this time. Graphically and art direction wise, X4 is a marked improvement over X3. I love 16-bit sprite work as much as the next guy, but Capcom's 5th gen era sprite work is just in a tier all its own. I'm not sure why the indie retro revival era of the late 2000s to early 2010s never tried to bring back this era of sprite work, because there's definitely more that can be done with this style. I mean, look at the way the dragon boss looks here. This thing is just so sick, and I'd love to see more of this sort of stuff in the future within modern video games. Beyond these initial aspects, the iRobot plot of the X series is on full display, and while X4 doesn't do characterization super well, the prospect of the Reploids trying to free themselves from control of the humans is such a great backdrop for the plot and its atmospheric storytelling. In the past, the Sigma virus added a great element to this Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep style story by adding corruption to the story. I personally kinda like this trope when it's done well, and since I'm definitely more interested in the character designs and boss mechanics in X games over the story elements, I've always enjoyed this reasoning for why the Mavericks go rogue in the story. John, though, isn't a big fan of this trope in stories. Lord of the Rings is an exception for him, and if I cared more about the raw storytelling and lore in this game, I would likely be right there with him. The trope is done mostly poorly in fiction, with characters like Frodo and Majin Vegeta being good examples of the corruption trope done right. These are things we both thought about as we went into the game, and after this, we jumped right into our first robot master, Cyber Peacock. Right off the bat, Cyber Peacock's cyberspace level demonstrates X4's massive variety in enemy and level designs versus those present in X3. The obstacle course motif of Peacock's stage shows how Capcom began experimenting with different sorts of platforming design within the Mega Man X subseries. What's more, Capcom clearly brought their A-game towards the development of stages within this game, which is great except for the fact that John and I were rarely sent into fits of uncontrollable laughter, at least compared to our playthrough of X3. This isn't really a negative though, as this game is clearly much better than that game in nearly every single metric right off the bat. The switch from the 4th generation of gaming to the 5th generation brought many improvements to game scope, sound, and graphics, but in addition to these, saving and checkpoints were something else PS1 era games could do that SNES era games couldn't. At least on average. I know there were games like Final Fantasy VI and A Link to the Past, but on average SNES games didn't allow you to save. This means the password system of X's 1 through 3 is gone in favor of the then fairly new saving system. One of the biggest problems with X3 is its overlong levels, and it's clear Capcom noticed this too, as X4 introduces the concept of mid-level checkpointing, which allows the player to reset at the halfway point in a level even if they game over. The obstacle course design of Peacock's stage would have become way too laborious if it weren't for this feature, so I'm happy they included it. This way the levels never overstay their welcome, and John and I both left left the game with far more positive impressions of every single level as a result. To progress through these sections, John and I needed to obtain an A rank, and I quickly called the fact that upgrades would be hidden behind S ranks. The concept is pretty simple. Get to the end of the level faster and you get the S rank. Anyone who's played Resident Evil or DMC would know this is a Capcom staple though, so it's not like this was a crazy thing to see coming. This may be the first time Capcom put S ranks into a game though, which is super interesting. Since I played the opening level, John got the controller to play through this level because we passed the controller on either the successful completion of a level or death. That's how we ensure both of us get to play a nice amount in our co-op playthroughs of single-player games. The second half of the level leaves the obstacle courses behind, instead being a gravity switching one. The way the level jump cuts when flipping the stage is weird, but it is probably a hardware or software limitation, since I don't know of many games that attempted this sort of thing in 1997. While it is jarring when the stage is flipped, I'd hardly call it bad. Getting through this section put John and I against our first maverick of this game, Cyber Peacock. John was able to root around the boss pretty easily on his first attempt, as Peacock only used his upward dash and spear attack. He managed to clip John with the spears right at the end, and damn, these things do some serious damage.
Oh, that's a fuck ton of damage.
Jesus.
Oh my God.
No wonder it's easy to dodge.
Because if you get hit, it at least takes about 30 your HP.
Oh my God, it's not like you had a lot left, but you had like a third left.
Yes.
What the heck?
That's a hit, yes. At least a third. Let's see how much damage it does if you hit your full.
This attack seriously does about 1/3 of our health bar worth of damage, which is seriously scary. Considering how this attack and his other one are fairly easy to see coming though, I was pretty confident I could pluck all 9 of Peacock's feathers with ease on my attempt. However, this is not what happened at all. Peacock started our bout by using an attack we hadn't seen yet, homing missiles.
Oh, that's new. That's new.
Why? 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 Why me? What was that? What was that? 90% of my health was gone. I didn't know that was gonna happen.
I feel like it's a skill issue. I feel like it was a skill issue.
I literally didn't stand a chance and literally died so fast. After this, John and I changed the control scheme for Mega Man because the default setup is hella awkward. Essentially, we remapped dodge from circle to R2 and the secondary Mega Buster control to circle. Doing this allows us the ability to jump, shoot, and dodge more easily than when all of those actions were within the face buttons. With this setup, I figured John would be able to handle Peacock's missiles more easily, but here's the thing, Peacock didn't even bother to use the missiles on him.
What is this?
What? Oh my God, what? Are you kidding? Shoot him with the missiles, man!
He's just gonna kill me because I was jumping into his fucking things.
And of course, John saw this as the perfect opportunity to make fun of me for not being able to dodge Peacock's missiles.
Just dodge.
What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do, John? There's no iframes!
You can dodge a peacock feather, you can dodge a ball.
I can't dodge a ball!
You ran into it, dumbass.
Why does he keep getting me with it? Like, what is going on with Peacock's RNG? Why does he only use the missiles on me, while John gets the easiest cycles known to man?
What do you do different that makes him want to just hit you with missiles?
And I know I may look fired up, but I'm honestly having a great time. I love when this happens in these games because it always leads to some of the best back and forths between John and I. Peacock, in a lot of ways, reminds me of From Software's Souls bosses, as we just felt like if Peacock started with missiles, the run was ruined, and we'd need to wipe to reset the boss.
No, please stop.
I kind of gave up because I was getting hit by dumb stuff.
Yeah,
too early.
I've had that happen too often. Usually it's not even worth it to try.
It was like I got smacked by 2 things I should have been able to get past.
It's like playing Souls games where you walk into the battle and you get a bad rotation.
And you're just like,
just
kill me, man. Bro, I'm not here for this. Just kill me.
Yeah. I remember we lost 2 Estes bullshit. Kill me.
Man, John used to be such a great little Catholic boy, but 15 years around yours truly, and he's transformed into the cussing simian you all see today. I can't claim to not indulge in a little apish fun myself, though.
Briar's the source of my corruption.
I'm the reason he cuss. Like a foul little monkey.
Who's a foul little monkey?
It's my John. He's a foul little monkey.
Fuck! You're like, wow. That's weird how you taught him to do that.
This boss just kept putting us through the ringer, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is not the recommended boss to try first in the game. John and I were so traumatized by X3 though, that we had a warped sense of difficulty coming into X4.
Oh, you approach me? And I just like, hiya!
Kill you, no jutsu.
It was specifically the no kill part.
I suck.
I suck jutsu. Oh god.
But finally, thank the heavens, John's luck ran out, and he too had to deal with the missile silo bombardment from this boss.
Oh my fucking god, this shit's insane.
Ugh.
Stop! What the fuck is this?
Stop killing me.
Stop it!
It's not fair. You're supposed to only do that to Brian.
Brian's thing.
It's not fair when you do it to me.
I'm John. I'm the guy you don't fire missiles at.
I'm John and I deserve the easy cycles.
I do. I'm John. I'm the John.
I kill all the bosses and I'm a hit on boss kills because I get the easy cycles. And then they kill Brian with the hard cycles.
Yeah, I talk all the time. This is really accurate. This is more accurate, John.
And it's times like this that make me happy to have a friend like John around. Considering the gear I've had, it feels good to relax and be myself. And this is why we play games in a couch co-op context and why everyone misses these sorts of gaming sessions, right? Pretending to call my successful run of the boss like the great Bambino himself only to die immediately would be super lame if I was just on my own. Sorry, this is the one. I got it. That was the Great Bambino.
I don't know what that is. You're talking to a culturing ignoramus here.
Oh. You ever watch Sandlot?
No.
Oh my god, you really are culturally dumb.
Well, okay, I say ignoramus because it makes me feel educated, but you saying I'm culturally dumb makes it just feel
culturally illiterate.
Yeah, it's better. That's better. At least you're always like, man, you're culturally stupid. I can dodge it easily. Easily I can dodge the missiles, dies to the missile immediately.
After 20 minutes of attempts, John finally killed the boss, allowing us to move on with our playthrough.
I don't care, die.
Oh, you got him.
Oh, look at him explode.
I wish he was more on frame, but that is really cool.
Yeah, that's way
You know
better.
what? Actually, it doesn't flash the screen as much.
Oh yeah.
So I wonder if that's a anti-seizure thing. This boss was pretty fun. It was pretty clear that he's not intended to be the first boss of the game, but he also never felt impossible, given just the base Mega Man mobility toolkit. This is actually a great sign because one of the major issues with the last two games is the way that certain bosses necessitated finding the boots upgrade first before fighting them. Making bosses possible without upgrades adds credence to my theory that a robot randomizer run on this game is not only doable, but also fun.
Also, that fucking level was really fucking cool.
It was a unique level. I think the boss was cool too.
I like the boss.
I think
I hate the missiles, but that was, the fact that we can still kill them despite that.
I like the missiles because we had fun.
Oh yeah, my god.
A fun time with that guy. He was cool though. I liked him. And with that Peacock trimmed, dressed, and ready for Christmas dinner, John and I moved on to my choice of Maverick, Magma Dragoon. I chose Magma Dragoon simply because I love dragons. That's really the extent of my decision-making process for choosing this guy. Almost immediately, this stage became my favorite in the whole game. The way that the background dims and lights up because of the swirling lava below really adds to the ambiance of the cave. The sprite work on the flames is masterfully done, looking better than some flames do even by today's standards. Early on in the level, I noticed the little Goomba-style guys with helmets on.
Oh, look at
Oh, it's those little guys again. We haven't seen them in a long time. Because Mega Man X is the first game I've ever played, these guys are incredibly nostalgic for me and representative of the entire franchise as a whole. I love seeing them back in the series, especially since they essentially disappeared for both X2 and X3. Throughout the level, there are these falling meteors too, which really adds to the platforming challenge. I like how the developers for this game realized that just slapping spikes on every surface doesn't immediately improve the platforming gameplay loop of a Mega Man game, as it slows down the pace of what is supposed to be an action platformer. This is another thing they learned from X2 and X3, and the fact that a lot of things I personally didn't like about those games is already being addressed by the level design of this game is a great sign. Part 2 of the stage gives the player access to ride armor, and this iteration of the armor has some pretty great hitboxes and attack speed. It also can go through lava, which is incredibly nice. The second half of this level also has a fair few of these large, chunky missile launching type enemies, but they aren't too bad. With a good mash, they are ripped to shreds.
Oh, so that's...
I mash, he die. He doesn't make it. Taking the ride armor to the end of the section, John noticed this little path leading beneath the cliff face, and when I took the armor through there, I discovered you're able to enter Magma Dragoon's boss arena while within the armor. This is literally so sick, and marks the first time where we've been able to do that in the series so far. The ride armor is a major boon in the fight, and with it, I was able to reduce his health pool to nearly 0 on the first attempt. The issue is that outside of the armor, I wasn't sure how to approach the boss, so he ripped me to shreds. Because of how we trade the controller back and forth, it was funny seeing the look on John's face when he realized he was going to have to fight him from the beginning without the ride armor though. Magma Dragoon is essentially a Street Fighter character as he uses Hadoukens and Shoryukens consistently. It's a neat detail that those are the 2 skills Mega Man can acquire in the first 2 X games, and that he's wearing prayer beads like Akuma. I'm actually going to be reviewing the different versions of Street Fighter 2 in a month or 2, so if you'd like to hear my thoughts on that series as basically a first-time player, make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell. I've got loads of creations based around Capcom's work, mainly Mega Man and Street Fighter, planned for next year. I have started playing World Warrior, and I am glad that Dragoon doesn't cheat like the AI in that game. It didn't take us that long to extinguish this dragon, and by the end we did learn a few important things. Peacock's weapon is not his weakness, meaning it is going to be good against a future boss, and Dragoon's weapon is extremely likely to be good against a different boss as well. Since fire doesn't really feel like a good fit for Peacock's weakness, we decided to go to Web Spider from this point because we speculated that either Aiming Laser or Rising Fire could be good against him, since we figured he would likely be centered around being above the player, given his spider-based design. For this reason, we concluded that either Aiming Laser would be able to hit him while he was above us, or Rising Fire would be able to burn his webs. Web Spider's stage has some of the most beautiful water I've ever seen in a game, both in the level itself and in the backdrop filling the negative space. In classic video game fashion, there is an upgrade hidden by a waterfall within the level, and going here yielded us the boots upgrade, allowing us to air dash and hover. The hover mechanic is new and weird. It essentially allows Mega Man to float and move in a horizontal way for a second or two. John and I never discovered many use cases for this ability, and I personally would have been fine if this thing just didn't exist at all. The boots upgrade being on this level clued John and I into the fact that this is likely supposed to be the first level Mega Man is intended to visit, as that's essentially how it worked in X and X3. X2 was a little different since the boots were locked behind a wall that required a boss weapon to break, but X2 was weird in terms of its collectibles in a lot of ways. This stage has 3 separate enemies that are pretty cool. Firstly, the fish people, the Sahagin style enemies, are a nice addition to this game, since they attack in a few different ways, teaching the player to watch and study enemies early on. This is a crucial thing to be communicated to the player, and since this is likely intended to be the first level of the game, it makes a lot of sense to put these types of enemies here. Secondly, there are robot snakes that can drop on the player from outside the player's view, which in a lot of games would be annoying, but since Mega Man's Mega Buster has great spread, catching all of these is really not a problem. We did start using the aiming laser to help with these, and this weapon is really finicky. So the way it works is that when it is equipped, the player controls its targeting reticle with the directional buttons or left analog stick, meaning it matches the direction Mega Man is moving. Attaching aiming to directional movement is hella awkward, but there was really no other way for Capcom devs to do this style of weapon since dual analog sticks didn't exist yet in gaming. The first DualShock controller wouldn't come out until November 1997 in Japan and in 1998 for North America. This means this type of controller just didn't exist before this game came out, and even if it did, it likely wouldn't have been far enough along in development for Capcom to capitalize on the new hardware. This is before mentioning that gamers weren't completely sold on the dual analog when it did come out. I remember being crazy young when I first encountered dual analog controllers, and I found it extremely hard to transition from using just a D-pad to that. Ape Escape did wonders to make the use of them feel more familiar with time. And lastly, there are these beehives that spit out loads of bees that'll swarm the player if given the chance. Mega Man's Mega Buster absolutely destroys them though, and it is satisfying to see them all explode at the same time. Within the second part of the level, we discovered another upgrade in the form of a health increase. This was hidden in a rotten chunk of wood, which intuitively communicated to us that we needed to hit it with our new flame attack. The extra health is a nice addition. Web Spider himself is not too bad, and he clearly is intended to be the first Maverick of the game. He's really only got 2 moves, and that's it. He can send out a web attack, which is pretty easy to dodge, especially with the air dash, and in his second phase he will summon baby spiders that just run across the floor before disappearing in the jungle canopy overhead. Now, getting caught in his web is really dangerous, as this thing does extreme damage, and by the end of this fight, John and I didn't really understand how it worked. It seemed like struggling to get out of the web hurt Mega Man more than just staying put, but neither of us could really confirm that. At the start of his second phase, Web Spider summons these large webs that dominate the middle area of the screen, and we thought we couldn't touch his webs in this phase, so we fought the boss while staying to the tiny edge of the arena. This is not actually the case, as you are able to go through the middle despite the webs, which would have made dodging his baby spiders much easier. Since John was better at jumping the webs, he killed the boss, meaning we could now have 3 weapons that may be good against future bosses. We speculated that it could be possible that Lightning Web is the weakness of Peacock, as it maybe stopped his missiles, which really is the thing that makes that boss dangerous. We wouldn't be able to check until the boss rush step of the game though. For no other reason than me wanting to fight a lion, I selected Slash Beast for our next Robot Master. Every level in this game has been crazy unique in terms of its theming and design, and Slash Beast's level continues this trend. This whole level is a train assault section, and I love these types of levels in games. They are honestly some of my favorites. I'm not a super big fan of Naughty Dog's work post the Jak and Daxter franchise, but if there's one section of their games that is undoubtedly good, it's the train section of Uncharted 2. Being on trains just adds an element of speed to games that otherwise doesn't exist. Even though Mega Man doesn't actually move any faster or anything like that, the train's movement itself makes every frame of this level feel faster than it actually is. The mini-boss on this level is pretty interesting too. It's not super difficult or anything like that, but I like the way this boss attacks and provides the player openings to hit them on the crackback. I also like bosses that are designed to get easier with time as you destroy more pieces of them, and this sub-boss is a pretty good representation of this boss fight archetype. The second half of this level is the part I really love though. So I'm a pretty big fan of Contra style games, and the main reason I like them is because of the way each screen is loaded with bullets, enemies, and obstacles. This part of Slash Beast's level feels very Contra-esque to me, because of the way there's never a down moment where Mega Man isn't being accosted by an assortment of enemies. Even better than this is the fact that there's ride armor on this stage too, allowing the player to absolutely rip the entire train apart. Destroying the individual sections is hella fun, and at the end of this stage there's an easy to obtain heart upgrade. The introduction of Slash Beast matches the action movie vibes of this stage too. Instead of just waiting for Mega Man at the end of the level, he runs up behind Mega Man from the ground, catching up to the speeding train the player's on. Slash Beast himself is not too difficult at all. He's tied with Web Spider as the most fair-feeling boss in the game, and I wouldn't be shocked to learn if people suggest him as the first Maverick to hunt down. I enjoyed my fight against him, and I managed to beat him on my first attempt, meaning John was the one to first attempt the boss that immediately followed him up, the Colonel. After defeating 4 Mavericks, Mega Man hunts down the Colonel accused of rebelling against humanity, putting the player in a new, short stage that is little more than just a boss fight. John beat the boss without too much trouble, and his design is quite cool. He's essentially a sword-style boss, but unlike the previous ones of those in the X series, like Agile, he's actually pretty fun to play against. He does this teleport attack where he disappears before reappearing a few frames later in front of Mega Man, and this move really adds to the action of the boss fight. His design really makes the fight feel like a dance in a lot of ways. Like there's an ebb and flow to the boss's strikes and the player's riposte opportunities. Since he escapes at the end of this fight, John and I knew we'd encounter him again later, probably in the Sigma stages, and I personally like this motif in video games. I love when there's a rival or arch nemesis style character that gets stronger over time and the player has to beat them over and over again. This is why Pokemon Red and Blue are one of my favorite games in that franchise. The fights with Blue were just so cool to experience as a kid, and I always look forward to when games reuse this boss design trope. With a final yell of Colonel, Mega Man leaves this zone, allowing us to queue up for our next boss, Jet Stingray. At this point, I'm going to sound like a broken record because Stingray's level is the most unique level in the game so far, as it is entirely on speed bike, which is literally so cool. I like when games introduce these sorts of elements to break up the typical flow of the game, as Blazing Chrome does this as well, and it just adds some nice variety to the experience. A lot of this level is memorization, so we did die a lot trying to learn the area, and we died even more just trying to get the collectibles. The speed bike has its own implementations of Mega Man's moveset, which is pretty nice. Shooting is a useful aspect of the bike, since it helps remove obstacles, and after a few deaths, I discovered how amazing the boost on the speeder is. I just wish I didn't immediately kill myself with it, as soon as I learned I could do it.
I'll wait for you to dash into your death. Yep, there it is. I'm like, Brian discovered a new ability, he's gonna use it to kill himself, I knew it.
Mobility. The second part of the level is even more interesting because Stingray starts to tail Mega Man, and you can chase him away by dashing right on top of him. This makes the level a bit easier and adds to the atmospheric storytelling of this section. Communicating elements of characterization, story, and lore via gameplay, set pieces, and art direction is something unique to video games, and it is an element of storytelling games need to utilize more often. Admittedly, this sort of storytelling is far more common in the 80s and 90s because of the hardware limitations of that era. But if From Software has shown us anything, atmospheric storytelling is just as good, if not better, than cutscene-based storytelling. Mega Man X was so good at showing its story through the former way that it's something both John and I have been wanting to see the series do again as we've been going through the X section of the franchise. This part of the level has a refill tank on it, and John and I started intentionally dying to ensure we wouldn't miss it. And if I played this game solo, this would have been kind of annoying. But annoying things in games can sometimes just be funny when you're playing with friends. Destroy it. Did it destroy it though?
I don't know, because I fucking didn't touch it. I just fucking died. For science! What a nobler goal than that.
For science,
For
John.
science, do the same thing I was telling you not to do earlier.
Do it again. We gotta have data. Data. Oh, we gotta have data, John.
Okay, Brian.
Oh my
fuck it
god.
up.
Get the data. No!
No! You stupid bitch! You made me kill myself for this? Die like the whore you are!
No, I'm gonna win!
It'd be the ultimate insult.
No, John, I'm gonna
we
win!
even get the reserve tank.
We don't need the reserve tank, John. We're gonna win! If one of us did accidentally get to the boss just by being too much of an epic gamer, we did try to start learning the boss because that was a good use of the rest of our lives. This guy was the toughest robot master for us because if he manages to get some of his children out, it's all over. It's just too hard to compete with those, and with him constantly going from one end of the stage to the other. The only way we were able to beat him was by lining our shots up with him in such a way to prevent him from spawning his children in the first place. He's got a couple of other moves, but they aren't too rough. He will dive into the water to move to one end of the stage from the other, and after some time has passed, he will go below the water to pull out this suck gun that pulls Mega Man towards him. Stingray only seemed to do this whenever he'd spawned enough kids, so I suspect this is intended as a way of ensuring Mega Man runs into the swimming Stingray babies all over the ocean floor. The babies themselves are so dangerous just because of the way Stingray's boss arena slopes downward on both ends. This makes Mega Man's weapon really bad at killing his kids, since they are so small they slip underneath the Mega Buster's bolts. One time, I killed the boss without trying, which means we'll have to redo the first part of the stage to ensure we could actually get that refill tank in the second part of the stage. Oh, I killed him.
Just to get the reserve.
We'll come back later. John didn't think I could actually do it.
No words can properly explain the amount of disappointment I'm feeling right now.
I'm sure I can disappoint you again even more. Just give me some time to cook it up real quick. And to be perfectly honest with you all, John hard carried me through the Mega Man X challenge we did back in June, and through Mega Man X2 back in October. It was only in X3 that I finally pulled my weight in these games because I'm well known for being absolutely terrible at platformers. I clearly have improved though, and I like how that's showing up in fights like this. At this point, Stingray and Peacock are on the same level of difficulty, and both John and I managed to take one down. With this Maverick dismantled, we moved on to our next boss, Split Mushroom. Whenever we boot up these games, I know instantly which bosses John is going to pick for his turns because they typically fall into one of three camps. John always picks the bugs, plants, or cute looking bosses in these games, and that's the way it's essentially worked out in each of our Mega Man playthroughs so far. Starting out, Mushroom's level takes place on this looping staircase. Graphically, this section looks weird, and I don't like the way it feels pretty choppy with the way Mega Man looks when he's moving to the right. After leaving this part though, the level fits nicely into the climb a tower platformer level design archetype, and of the X games we've played, this is probably my favorite of these sorts of levels. As we climbed higher up the tower, we encountered these budding flowers that shoot pellets of energy and regrow after being destroyed once a set amount of time has passed. The enemy design of this game is literally perfect, as each unique robot matches the aesthetic and vibe of its specific level, which is something that was definitely missing in X3. Since I beat Stingray, John got to attempt the level first, and when this happens, it usually means that I won't get a chance to play the level at all, because John is literally the best platforming player I know in real life. However, in the second half of the level, John choked while trying to get up to this health upgrade, as he smugly handed the controller over to me, confident he'd get it back soon. I readied myself for the task at hand. To my surprise, I got up there no problem, grabbed the hard upgrade, and finished the rest of the second half of this level. John was so sad and depressed that his title as Platforming King was so rudely snatched away from him, even if it was only for just a brief moment.
I'm the platform boy. I do platforming.
Split Mushroom is the smallest Maverick alongside Chill Penguin, and this is the first time where John and I had the weakness for the boss in this game. Split Mushroom, as his name implies, makes copies of himself. Hitting these other copies doesn't hurt the original, but with Lightning Web, Split Mushroom is always revealed the instant he touches it. He actually makes this incredibly satisfying sound when he's being shocked too. I like his screams. I missed one too many times with Lightning Web, so I ran out of weapon power just as I was ready to deal the killing blow to the boss. He managed to then finish me off, giving John the chance to fight the Maverick he chose. With Lightning Web, he killed the boss with ease, earning back his title as the Platforming King, and from here, we moved on to Frost Walrus. I've always been a huge fan of ice levels in games. I personally love ice physics in platformers, so as soon as I realized this was a frozen level, I was hyped to play through it. The first part of the level has this cool ice slide section where the frozen declines break over time. The penalty for being slow is a swift descent and depth among the spikes below. On this level, John and I learned that we could use Web Spider's ability to create platforms to wall jump off of, which allowed us to get a refill tank collectible. I really like the way these X games change up the mobility options the player has access to in each game. Considering the platforming nature of these games, mobility changes truly do make each of these experiences vastly different from one another. I'm not a big fan of the hover mechanic that the boots upgrade gives in this game though, as it felt like it messed me up while platforming much more often than it helped. Another cool section, pun intended, on this level is the falling ice platform part near the end. I like these sorts of sections in platformers when the designers allow the player to get through the section faster. If it's auto-scrolling, it's bad, but since this isn't, it's good. When developers allow players to go fast at the risk of dying, levels are just better in my opinion. This half of the level is capped off by the Ice Claw sub-boss, and it's no surprise that this is weak to Rising Fire. Considering the vertical movement of the boss, this move plays extremely well against him too, which I like to see. It's always a good sign when the weapons play well against the things that they are strong against in these games. In the background of this room is Chill Penguin frozen in a chunk of ice, which is a super cool Easter egg, complementing the frozen blizzard buffalo in the first frame of the level extremely well. They are the only other ice-based bosses in the X series so far, and I like that Capcom brings them back in the backdrop portraits of this level. The coolest thing about the second part of this level is the frozen ice block section. How the player interacts with these ice blocks determines how many enemies they have to fight, and whether they're able to easily access the weapon energy refill tank or not. Following this part, the player will encounter these goose-like enemies that emit a freezing AoE that turns the section of the level they're at into an ice-covered version of itself. This is a super neat idea, and I wish this would have happened to more places in the level. Frost Walrus himself looks super awesome, mainly because of his gigantic ice tusks. Rising Fire is a weird ability to use against him, as I had to run right up to him to ensure I'd actually hit him with the skill. Once he's been hit, his tusks, pauldrons, and legs melt, essentially turning him into a different enemy for a few seconds. He crawls across the floor, and in this state, Walrus is susceptible to a fully charged Mega Buster Blaster too. Once he's reformed, it's easy to thaw him out again. The way Rising Fire impacts Frost Walrus reminded me a lot of the way bosses like Armor Armadillo are hurt by their weakness, as it truly changed the mechanics of the fight after he'd been cooked. The Frost Tower ability we got from his smoldering corpse is extremely weird and only plays well in a few very specific instances. With Frost Walrus baked to a crispy critter, Storm Owl was the only barrier between us and the endgame. There are 4 things on Storm Owl's level worth noting. Firstly, this level starts out by giving the player a set of hawk armor, and this feels so cool to use. The armor's charged attack brings out these homing shots that absolutely devastate everything they touch. In the background of the level, we're able to see what Storm Owl's fleet looks like, and the design of the ships are so freaking cool. The star cruisers in the background are in the shape of hammerhead sharks, and in a weird way, they look similar to the StarCraft battle cruisers. I don't think X4 inspired Blizzard or anything like that though, because it's not like the starship design is crazy unique. Periodically, the level takes the player beneath these big beams that fire below, which remind me a lot of the White House destruction scene in Independence Day. John killed the owl so fast that I really don't have anything to say about his design. Aiming laser just rips him apart, and I didn't even get a chance to try him out. Throughout our time going through the levels, John and I were able to pick up most of the collectibles, but there were still a few more to mop up, and with the death of Owl, we were ready to start our backtracking journey. For the most part, the collectibles aren't too bad. I actually like how the collectibles are hidden in most levels. S-ranking the Peacock stages is where John and I started out, and I just let John do this part. I don't mind these sorts of challenges, but this is the type of thing that really requires rote memorization, and it would just slow us down a lot to have to switch back and forth. We only get the chance to play these games together every handful of weekends, so time is a limited resource. One we couldn't really afford to spend on something like this. The final obstacle course gave us the helmet upgrade, which granted us infinite weapon energy. While I like this, I am confused by its inclusion since a weapon refill tank exists in the same game. This does make that refill tank kind of redundant. Overclocking weapons still burns energy, so I guess you may want the weapon refill for that, and in that case I like how Capcom made it more viable to use overclocked boss weapons in this game. One of my major critiques of the X series as a whole is how overclocking the boss weapons is rarely useful, and while X4 doesn't fix this either, it's clear Capcom was trying to address this minor quibble. There is one X2 tier god-awful collectible in this game though, and it is on Storm Owl's stage. There's this spike-ridden path outside of Owl's boss room that leads up to the Mega Buster upgrade. To get up there though, you've got to use lightning web and pixel-perfect jumps and hovers without dying. I don't like these sorts of platforming challenges, and not just because I'm kind of bad at platformers. I had to leave this to John too because there's no way I would ever be able to do this in a timely manner, making me more of a liability towards our progress. If I were playing on my own, I would have finished the game without this because I would have gotten just too frustrated trying to get it. There's actually 2 possible upgrades up there, but John and I chose the one that gave us the supercharged Mega Buster Bolt. This thing is sick because it leaves behind an area of effect damaging orb, making it the best version of the overclocked Mega Man Blast we've seen in the series so far. This arm upgrade is necessary for attaining the final armor piece on Magma Dragoon's level. Right above the right armor, armor, there's this rock wall that is immune to all forms of damage, except for an overclocked shot of Slash Beast's twin Slasher. Having attained this final collectible, John and I moved to the final stages of this playthrough, the Sigma stages. There are only 3 Sigma stages this time around, and the first one starts out with the second Colonel confrontation. With access to all of the Maverick weapons, we discovered that he was weak to Frost Tower, but this thing just doesn't play well against him. It is so awkward to use that John just didn't use it at all on his attempt. I speculated at the time that Zero's version of the attack probably plays better against the boss. Beating him is essentially the only thing of note about the first Sigma stage though, and I'm okay with that. Personally, my least favorite things about these X games have been the Sigma stages, as I found most of them to just be bad levels. The first game had pretty good levels, but the second and third game's suite of Sigma stages are not something I will ever subject myself to again. The second Sigma stage is basically just 2 boss fights. Double, which is this comrade who's been with us since the beginning of the game, double crosses us in the lead up to the level. This creates a boss fight unique to Mega Man, and I'll be talking about Zero's unique boss fight in his dedicated section. I haven't talked about Double yet because he literally doesn't matter beyond the story until this point in the game, and like I said near the top, I play these games more for their gameplay, bosses, and level design than their lore. Double is an okay boss, but there's nothing super special about him. He does this slash beam, dive attack, and these 2 orb things, but most of the time you're able to just stay on the opposite side of the zone and shoot him from afar. After him is the General, and John killed him by literally sitting on a wall and shooting. He didn't need to engage with the boss at all, though both he and I speculated that this would be harder with Zero.
Crazy, like, oh my god.
It was kind of crazy easy. It was so weird watching you do that. I'm like, he's not, for the first 90% of his health bar, he didn't do anything.
It's just, yeah.
The final Sigma stage is split into 2 major sections, the boss rush and Sigma himself. I love the boss rush step of these games because it's a chance for John and I to figure out what all of the bosses are actually weak to. Web Spider's weakness just didn't compute for me at first because Twin Slasher was the first thing I tried, but it didn't seem to do that much damage and there was no visual cue that the spider is weak to it. Overclocking it is where the real damage is, and I suppose I don't hate that too much because I did say earlier in the video how I wish overclocked boss weapons were more useful. Peacock is weak to Soul Body, which is interesting since it is like you're disrupting his cyberspace entity. X4 makes the boss weaknesses make more sense than the ones in X3, which is just another plus in this game's favor. Stingray being weak to Frost Tower also makes sense in a gameplay way because of the way it kills all of his tiny guys. It also phrases him when he swoops into the water, which means you'll always catch him lacking. It trivializes the one thing that made his boss fight hard, which is nice. I likely will never fight this boss with Mega Man before getting Frost Tower again as a result. Dragoon is weak to Double Cyclone, which also makes sense since the ability catches him regardless of which move he's doing. Dragoon does try attacking from both ends, so this ability means he can't cross up on the player anymore. The best thing of all is how Double Cyclone scripts this boss, making him loop the same response over and over again. This is the same thing Flame Stag and Sting Chameleon do when they've been hit by their weakness, and it essentially makes the boss a pushover. Slash Beast is weak to Stingray's children as he slips on them, stunning him for a second. The overclocked version also catches him when he tries to jump. The animation for him slipping is pretty funny, so I'm happy we got the chance to use this on him. After the boss rush, we had to fight Sigma, and his 3 phases took us an hour to best. The first phase is a Grim Reaper looking guy, and he dies easily to Rising Fire. There's not much to say about this phase because of just how trivial it is while using his weakness. The second phase is a bit tougher but still manageable. Sigma is some sort of boomerang guy in this part, and he dies to Lightning Web because he essentially stays in the middle most of the time, meaning he constantly keeps jumping right into the web. Neither of these phases are a real issue. It is the third phase that kept us trying and dying again and again. There are 2 things you have to kill. Body Double is the weakness of the Gun Sigma, which just plays awkwardly, and Stingray's ability is good against the big head version. You essentially just dump a bunch of Stingray's children into Sigma's mouth to kill this part of the boss. Both versions of Sigma have to be killed, and he switches from one to the other in a loop. John ended up being the one to kill him, and this was not too bad of a boss. For me, Sigma stages are part of the Mega Man X games I really don't like that much, but this game's stages weren't too bad. I actually liked all of them pretty much. My one quibble with Sigma is that it is crazy annoying that there's no way to quickly refill health tanks before him, which means redoing the boss rush if you want to leave the stage to refill the tanks. That's the reason we took an hour on this guy, just because he's a major drain on resources. We would have had him in 20 to 30 minutes if we could have refilled more quickly and efficiently. And if I ever play this game again, I'm going to come more prepared for this fight. With Sigma down, Mega Man's campaign ends, but X4 isn't quite over yet, as there is a second, separate campaign for this game. John and I had enough time to start playing Zero's story together, but since we had to stop early, most of the footage you'll be seeing in this section is me playing. That means you'll be able to easily tell why I say I'm pretty bad at platformers. We played Web Spider first, but we found him kinda tough, so I made a speculative pick and we went with Dragoon next. The way Zero plays is just wonderful though. The way that Web Spider's level played with a melee character was just as good as with Mega Man, and this shows just how masterfully crafted the levels are in this game. They were designed with both playstyles in mind, and I really love this. This is one of the true highlights of X4. Zero devastates Dragoon, making Dragoon the best first boss for Zero in my opinion. This makes a lot of sense, since the Flame Uppercut is the weakness for multiple future bosses as well. For example, this thing absolutely destroys the Frost Walrus mini-boss because it procs multiple times on him, killing him in 1 or 2 activations. This ability plays extremely well with the Walrus too, and it feels so cool to walk right up to that hulking beast and start comboing off. I really like fighting games and character action games, so Zero's playstyle felt extremely natural to me. After Frost Walrus, John had to leave, so I played the rest of the Maverick stages on my own. Stingray was next on my list since he's weak to ice. I quickly discovered a hack for fighting this boss though. Since Zero's sword takes care of Stingray's children extremely well, Zero can literally just stand in one of the corners and wait for Stingray to use his suck gun. When he does, the player is able to constantly combo his backside, absolutely melting his health bar. I think the way the developers intended the player to play against Stingray is for them to bait out Stingray's side-switching swim, Shovel Knight Goomba-ing him once he does with the downward ice spike special. My way is much safer though. From here, Slash Beast fell quickly just because of my ability to air dash and him being susceptible to multi-proc hits with Zero's main combo. Slash Beast would be an easy first boss for Zero to fight against too. In the Mega Man campaign, we fought Colonel at this point, but Zero's love interest, Iris, stops us from fighting Colonel here because he's her brother. Oh geez, this is definitely not foreshadowing or anything like that, right? Web Spider isn't really weak to anything, but by this point, I just was more comfortable playing with Zero, so I killed him pretty quickly. Web gives the player the standing Lightning Lance, which kills Mushroom. Just like Lightning Web, I just had to put this lance out and Mushroom would just run right into it thoughtlessly. Mushroom gives the mid-air spin dash, which does play pretty well against Peacock, but honestly, Peacock's real weakness is the Flame Uppercut because it distorts him in the same way Soul Body did with Mega Man. I do like the airborne spin dash though, as it reminds me of the screw attack from the Metroid franchise. Peacock gives us this multi-180 shot, which is good against Owl, and after Owl, the Sigma stages begin. Just like with Mega Man, Colonel is the boss of the first Sigma stage, and Zero's ice attack is far better against him than Mega Man's Frost Tower, as slamming down on him is much better than standing on top of him, just so that you're able to drop a block of ice on his head. When the Colonel does his teleport strike, it feels so cool to jump up and smash an ice spike right into his stupid face. This type of riposte feels even more epic than when we fought this guy as Mega Man. As expected, killing him puts us at odds with Iris, and she replaces Double as Zero's unique boss. She's actually crazy interesting and a much better boss too. Essentially, she can only be hit on her crystal, and she does a lot of CC effects to prevent Zero from being able to do that. She was the hardest boss so far for me, but I managed to beat her, which gave me this insane cutscene.
Iris, there's no world just for Reploid. It's only a fantasy.
Yes, I know, but I wanted to believe it. I wanted to live in a world where only Reploids exist, with you.
Iris! 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 Ah! No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What? What am I fighting for?
I wouldn't be shocked to learn this is a major meme within the Mega Man community. I think it's cool that one of Zero's voice actors redid the scene later.
Iris, it's only fantasy. There is no world just for Reploids.
I know, but I wanted to believe it. I wanted to live in a world where only Reploids exist. With you.
Iris. 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 Iris! Iris. Iris. No! This isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on! What am I fighting for?
Iris's boss and character designs are both really on point, and while I'm sure she won't show up for the rest of these X games, I hope we do get to see her in an X reboot series or something like that. I don't really want this X series to be remade, but if it were rebooted with better writing and a higher quality bar across all of the games, I think this relationship between Zero and Iris could be developed to a deeper level, which would make this sort of scene more emotionally painful for the player. The General is a super hard boss fight with Zero, and I didn't manage to beat him before moving on from this game. It would have been fun to do this with John, but I just don't have time in my production schedule to spend a lot of time on this guy. I love the whole idea of this second campaign though, and I love playing Zero much more than Mega Man in this game. This is a great change for the series, and I hope X5 does this sort of thing again. I speculate Zero is much better against Sigma, and I wouldn't be shocked if one of you in the comments told me that. With Zero's campaign nearly finished, it's time to move on to the final block of my review, where I answer the question, will X4 make my top 100 of the 90s? A lot of Mega Man X4's design decisions seem like a response to the criticisms I've heard of X3 since doing that review. X4 is much easier than X3, but this is not a bad thing. And for John and I, the easier difficulty was actually a nice palate cleanser after how awfully hard some of the sections in X3 are. X4's levels feel large in scope without actually being too long to play through. They are all unique from one another, each level is loaded with unique enemy designs, and the quality bar of the stages is more consistent throughout the whole game. The Sigma stages also don't ruin the experience either, which is nice, as John and I both didn't like X3 by the time we'd battled our way to Kaiser Sigma. The mid-level checkpointing is so good too, as we probably wouldn't have liked X4 as much if we'd had to have replayed each level over and over again. Some of the weapons in this game are immensely specialized, and most of the bosses are immune to nearly all of the weapons the player has access to. This makes a lot of the weapons less useful and is hella lame. This means the weapons are weaker than X3's suite, which puts this game's weapon suite in between X3 and X2 in terms of quality. The way the bosses are designed in this game does make a robot randomizer run viable, which is something that does make me love this game a little bit more. If that's something you would all like to see John and I do, let me know, and I'll ask him if he'd like to do that sometime. Both of us agree that this game is the second best X game so far, and while John wasn't a fan of Dragoon, he did like every other boss in the game to some degree. So with all of that considered, will this game make my top 100 list for the 1990s? Yes, Mega Man X4 will be making the list in the blue category. I categorize games in my various top 100 lists as blue or red. A red game is locked in and isn't likely to ever leave. A blue game is one that will be in the first wave of cuts as better games make my list. I'm not at all confident that X4 will stay on there by the time I finalize my list, since there are 204 games left to play on my 1990s backlog, which is why it's gonna go in that blue category. And that's the video, my guys. What do you think of Mega Man X4? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're there, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Next year will be the year of Capcom for me, so I'll be covering loads of Capcom games. If you want to see my thoughts on the rest of the X series and the mainline Mega Man games, you'll want to keep up with me. I release new gaming videos every single Friday, and next week I'll be sharing my top 25 games of the 2020s, since 2024 marks the end of the halfway point for this decade. Regardless of what you choose to do, thank you for keeping it real with Rayl Deal Games. Have an awesome day, my friend.